Nappy. Hello, everyone joining. We will get started shortly, but while we are waiting, please tell us the town that you're from, and the type of land that you manage.
I'm sorry, Jess, could you just repeat what you said? It was a little scratchy there while you were talking.
Yeah, we will get started shortly. While we are waiting, if we could have the participants tell us the town you're from and the type of land that you manage in the chat box feature.
How do you do that, Jess?
You're on your phone, right? I don't know if
Yep.
you can.
Okay.
Yeah, you can try to tap on the screen and see if it allows you to use the chat box.
No. It doesn't.
If whoever that was, if you want me to write in for you, I can.
Okay. Heidi and Tim Duval.
Mhm.
We live in Belmont and we have 36 acres of agriculture land. How much open? How many acres of open?
Do we operate them? About 320.
And we operate with leased property. We probably operate a total of about 300 acres in different communities in Belknap County.
What'd you say, 130?
300.
300.
300, geez, I was way off.
Yeah.
All right, let's get started. Welcome to Conservation Planning for Landowners webinar series. My name is Jess Casterline. I am an intern for Belknap County Conservation District, who is the host this evening for this webinar series, along with Prescott Farm and a number of other people that have made this possible. This is the second session of a 4-part series. This week we'll be talking about agriculture. Next week we have on the agenda land trust and conservation easements. And the last week we have forest land, wildlife, and watershed protection. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. It's just some webinar information. The session is being recorded. Participants will be muted for the length of the webinar. Your video is optional. You can use the chat box feature at the bottom of the screen. Questions will be addressed throughout the presentation, and there will also be time at the end. If you have any technical difficulties, you can privately chat me, the host, and I can help you work through your issue that you're having. And I will turn it over to Donna Hepp, our chairman of Belknap County Conservation District, for some welcoming words.
Well, welcome tonight. I'm looking forward to the discussion, from hearing from our 2 farmers, our 3 farmers, and finding out a little bit more about some of the questions and challenges that some of the other participants are facing. And really glad to have you in on the call. The Belknap County Conservation District is one of each county in the state has a conservation district. We owe our roots back to the Dust Bowl days. Next year, we're going to be celebrating our 75th anniversary of serving landowners, farmers, and communities here in Belknap County. Our focus has changed over the years, but agriculture has always been a key component of what we do. Our focus is on protecting land and water resources and other natural resources, including wildlife. And so we're really looking forward to the conversation tonight. And thank you folks for joining us. And I'll take it away. Jess, are you going to introduce our first presenters?
Yeah. Tonight we have our guest presenters. We have Heidi Loring and Tim Duval from HG Farms in Belmont, New Hampshire. And we also have Aaron Lichtenberg from Winnipesaukee Woods Farm in Alton, New Hampshire. So why don't we start with Heidi and Tim?
Hello.
How are we doing?
Well, Heidi and Tim are just down the road from me, and so I'm really pleased to have them join us, because I think it's very exciting what they've been able to accomplish in a very short time. Could you folks tell us a little bit about your farm and kind of your journey as you've expanded your operations? It's quite exciting.
Well, we started about 4 years ago. We decided that we wanted to, growing up on farms, and of course, when we're teenagers, we're never going to live on a farm again. We're never going to do animals or gardening. And here we are back, as adults doing that, and absolutely love it. We decided to raise beef cattle. We live on 36 acres of property in Belmont. We have about 300 acres of leased property throughout Belknap County that we've been working with 3 farms in particular, with a lease agreement of we are able to maintain the property there by either letting our livestock graze and use rotational grazing, or we're able to get hay off from their fields to feed our cows. So we really found our resources through, I started going to an Annie's Project seminar. I've actually been to a couple of them, and that was the starting of getting involved in the Farm Bureau, the conservation, NRCS, and all the FSA, all the different resources that are available in our community.
So how did you start out with the grazing? How many, so you had 36 acres, you're 36 acres, and then, and now you're managing how many?
We're grazing just over 100 and probably 160, 180 acres right now, with about 128 head of cattle. We started out with about 30 head of cattle 4 years ago, and we've expanded that much. We winter all the cows here on the property with sacrifice areas, and then in the spring we move them out in different groups. The mamas and calves go to one area after they're AI'd here. The yearling heifers will go to another area, and the feeders go to another area. And rotate them throughout the year. Typically they leave at end of April, first part of May, weather permitting, and we try to bring them back as late as possible. If I can stockpile fields, I'll bring them back as close to Thanksgiving as I can. This year I had to bring a group back early. I still do have, quite a few of them out to pasture. Some in Gilmanton, some in Guilford, that we'll probably be able to graze up until pretty close to Thanksgiving if the weather holds out.
So as you started this journey, I heard you talk about Annie's Project and tying in with NRCS. So what helped you as you were developing your goals and learning about some of the practices and the resources that were available? How did you zero in on your, what you wanted to do and how to go about it?
Well, obviously we knew with the limited acreage that we had here at the house, we weren't going to be able to reach the capacity of cattle that we wanted with the acreage that we had. So rotational grazing was, in leased land was definitely an option. And I'd spent 18 years prior to coming out here managing a herd of 2,200 cattle in Colorado. So I had a pretty good idea of herd management from there. I just need to incorporate it out east. So getting with Damien, me, and Bill Hoey, that started the process, of the land management. And then through Granite State Grazers with Damien, we set up the program of rotational grazing, myself and Damien.
So some of the folks that were providing some of this technical advice on going to rotational grazing and that type of thing were from the NRCS. Bill and Damien are from the NRCS, and their resources that are available.
Yep.
Correct.
To folks. Okay. And then what kind of programs did you get involved with NRCS to help with implementing your your goals and your operation?
With the rotational grazing, you had to go through a class with Damien and me on rotational grazing, learning different foraging and grasses, in order to get, main perimeter fencing around our property. That was one of the requirements, was to go through that class with Damien.
Mhm.
And then we put in for a grant to get main perimeter fencing for our heavy use area here at the house. We have three heavy use areas here at the house. So we put in for a grant after I went through the class with Damien for high tensile perimeter fencing. And then we also got a grant for a well system and water system for here at the main farm. And then we also got a grant for all of the poly tape and wire that we would need in our field. So we essentially I had to put a program together of different paddocks and how I was going to rotate all of the properties, what schedule I was going to use, how many days I was going to use in each paddock, how big the paddocks were going to be, how many days I thought I could get out of each paddock,
Mhm.
and submit it to NRCS. They reviewed it, put that together in with our package, and then they approved that package for rotational grazing, and then we received a grant to do that project.
Mhm.
And that gave us the flexibility to expand our herd.
Mhm.
And from there, then I just increased our breeding program. And I do all AIing. I'll use a bull for some cleanup, but I can control my genetics and my herd growth a whole lot better by AIing than I can with just one bull, or
Mhm.
rotating a bull in and out of here every year.
And I think you've done some other things as well. You did some work in terms of protecting some stream area and wetlands on your property as well.
We did. We have a few streams that run through the back of our property that we fenced off, in some wetland areas that drain directly to the Tioga River, into Belmont, which is part of the watershed system for the drinking water in the Belmont. So we fenced that off, and we keep the cows away from that and out of there. That definitely helped with the program. A couple of the areas where they went and looked at our rotational grazing, there was a woodcock habitat area. There was a monarch butterfly habitat area for
Mhm.
milkweed, which there's not too many cattle guys that are fond of milkweed, but I did section an area off and let the milkweed, go in that area. And I picked the pods after the monarch butterflies leave, so it doesn't affect any limits the spread of any more
Mhm.
milkweed in that area. And I keep I only brush hog or trim this one hedgerow up so far, so it keeps the woodcock in that one area. I limit the cows from that area when I graze.
Mhm.
There's a pond up at Steel Hill that we keep the cows out of. They're only sectioned to one corner of it because of the frogs, and there's a major turtle crossing on that section of the road, where they go across Steel Hill Road from one pond to another, and that was a big concern.
Mhm.
So we eliminated that. Small things that didn't seem like a lot to the local farmer meant a lot to NRCS and to the agricultural community down in,
Mhm.
yeah. So it was little things that we did that meant a lot to them. And I've noticed a big change, you know, as far as the wildlife up there. And it didn't really impact me at
Mhm.
all as far as the cattle.
Right.
I mean,
Well, you folks have been really creative in terms of your partnering for some of your grazing areas. You mentioned Steel Hill, and you know, here we've got a resort, and it turns out to be a great partner for not only your grazing operation, but also for your sugaring operation as well.
yeah, we graze just over 90 acres up there. So I have just over 25 paddocks up there that we rotate through. Typically every year, the residents of Steel Hill, the people who own timeshares up there, they're typically calling me by the beginning of May, wanting to know when the cows are coming up, sending us money. They don't like it when they leave and they want them back. The
Right.
owners of Steel Hill are very, very good with us with that. We maintain all of their fields. The backside of their property, we pretty much have 98% of I'm gonna say 95% of our sugaring operation on. So we have just over 2,500 taps on the backside of their property. Our storage tanks go from the top of Steel Hill and drain down to Woodman. We do cross through a couple other people's property to get to there, but it's
So-
worked out.
So, and you got some NRCS programs, I know, to help you, really expand your sugaring operation. And how much are you doing now?
We started off 6 years ago, making about 30 gallons a year, and we're up over 1,300 gallons a year now. So we've built a new sugar house. We've added a steam hood, a steam away, a reverse osmosis. The unit itself has got an auto drawer computered. Everything pretty much is automated. When it comes out of the evaporator, it's a finished product. It goes right into a vat, through a filter press, and into a keg. And we did receive grants from NRCS on that. We were burning roughly 15 cords of firewood in the course of 30 days, and we've cut that down to less than 3.
So
With the,
energy
with the,
efficiency is huge. Yeah.
energy efficiency is huge.
Terrific. How did you fare with the drought with your
Horrible.
grazing operation?
Awful.
You know, the grazing, some areas, you know, and that's one of the things with NSCS, you have to have a drought contingency plan for each one of your areas, and you have to have a
Mhm.
excessive wet, muddy plan. So if you get excessive rain and the fields are flooded, you have to have a plan for what you're gonna do. Are you gonna continue to graze those fields? Are you gonna pull them off? Do you have a sacrifice field to put them in so you don't, ruin the fields, muck them all up? And if it's a drought area, do you continue to graze them? They don't want you to graze the fields down to any less than 5 to 6 inches before you rotate them to the next paddock. And, this year, typically you hit that summer slump, in August, July, August. This year, we kind of went right into it early. So, we never really got a whole lot of regrowth. So I hit that summer slump early. So, I did end up putting cows, it's kind of the double-edged sword. You graze those paddocks down to nothing. And if you continue to graze it, you're just pulling the grass out by the roots because the ground's so dry. And then the following year, you're reseeding all your fields, and you just have, heavy compacted areas, dead grass, kill from the summer? Or do you put them in a sacrifice area and feed? In the long run, it's cheaper to feed them out for a month or two and let that grass grow, hope for some rain, and at least go dormant, in that summer slump, and at least it's going to come back the following year. So I chose to put mine in a few of my rotational areas in a sacrifice area and feed out. It did cost me some of my summer hay that I put up, but in the long run, it's a whole lot cheaper than reseeding fields. So that's one of the requirements, and NRCS does monitor that.
Mhm.
Bill Hoyer, Damien, me will call you up and say, what are you doing in the middle of this slump? What are you doing during this drought in your
Right.
grazing areas?
Mhm.
So,
Well, so-
they do track it.
So a tough year, but it sounds like a lot of the measures that you implemented in your plan, have been paying off.
They do pay off. We were probably 40% off on our overall crop this year as far as hay. We primarily put up haylage,
Mhm.
some dry hay, but mostly haylage because the nutritional value is better for, the beef cows. My sacrifice area is back here at the house. I've worked excessively, which you've seen, Donna, throughout the
Mhm.
summer. I plant a warm season grass. So I go in there, and I think we have photos of that. When the cows leave, I'll go in there and I'll put in a ladine clover or something, that'll come up later in this, early and then kind of go dormant. And then I put a sorghum sudan with turnip, sweet pea, millet, and then I put sunflower in there also, which those later crops will grow throughout the drought, and they grow
Mhm.
5-6 feet tall. And I let that stuff grow all summer, and I, stockpile those fields all summer. I don't harvest them, I don't cut them, I just leave them that tall. And then when I bring the cows home later in the year, I let them grub it, and as they grub it, I brush hog it down, and then they kind of eat through the different varieties of grass until they get down,
Mhm.
to those later season grasses. And then what it does do is it gives me a blanket. So when I go into the winter, I have a good blanket for compaction and for mud. So by the time spring comes, I very rarely have mud in my pastures.
Wow, great.
So when I go to I calve typically February, March. I don't have mud in my fields because I have that blanket from all of that,
Mhm.
the warm season grasses that I put out there, and then I brush hog down.
Great,
And I
Well-
do reseed every year.
great. Why don't we see if any of the folks listening in have any questions for Heidi and Tim?
Yeah, I will keep an eye out on the chat box to see if there's any questions, but now I can share some of the pictures that Heidi shared with me.
Okay.
We can go through them.
And maybe while you're showing the pictures, Martin, did you have a question?
Yes, I did. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I'd like to know, what is a sacrificial area?
It's an area that you're not concerned, well, you're concerned with it, but you can put your livestock in and take them out of a cropped area. So, if I have a pasture that I want to regrow, or that I'm grazing and I don't want to damage it, I can put the cows into an area that if they trample it or it gets destroyed, I'm not overly concerned with that. It's an area that I'm going to reseed the following year, rather than tearing up all of my grazing areas, just one section.
Okay, thanks.
That's one of my sacrifice areas that I've cleaned up, and I'm getting ready to no-till drill the following spring.
Mhm. I mean, we're not talking about gullying or anything like that. It's just an area that gets heavily used. Go ahead.
That's, preparing the no-till drill at heavy use area or sacrifice area. That's when the crops just started to come up. That's the section of rotational grazing area. Some cows in a rotational grazing area. That's the first stage of the area that where the no-till drill was. That's the crop as it's growing. There's some rotational grazing over at Steel Hill. There's the reverse osmosis, the sugaring unit, and some main line. There's some hay wrapping machine for our haylage and some round bales.
Hmm,
This is the help.
those are our working dogs,
And the supervisor.
right? The lab is our supervisor. She stands at the gate and makes sure nobody comes through. She doesn't hurt anybody, but she's the supervisor.
Great.
Any other questions for Heidi and Tim?
Yeah, I have one. I think it's pretty evident that you've had a great relationship with NRCS, and both for the grazing and the sugaring process. But I'd like to see if you can be more specific about the economic benefits that you've achieved from that collaboration that might encourage other people to look to them for help in the future for what you've experienced and whatever their needs might be.
You know, it's on a cost share basis. So the main perimeter fence, as an example out back, they paid 65% of the overall bill, and we were responsible for the rest of it. You have to have the money up front. And once they come and inspect the job, it has to meet they give you standards and a spec sheet of how the fencing has to be. And it has to meet, a certain NRCS, criteria. Once it meets that, then they pay 65% of what the bill was. So, financially, it's a huge benefit because some of these projects we just could not afford to do 100%. As far as the rotational grazing, they pay you a certain amount of money for 4 years,
Up to 4 years.
up to 4 years. So every year that I rotational graze and maintain the property per the guidelines that the grazing standards are, we get X amount of dollars per acre that we rotational graze. So I think, as an example for a smaller pasture that we have, we got, I think, $600 for one of the fields last year to rotational grazing. The reverse osmosis, is a $25,000 piece of equipment. They paid for 3/4 of it.
And there's a huge benefit with our maple production. We were spending 12 to 14 hours. Tim would spend all day Friday. We'd be there all day Saturday, all day Sunday, 9, 10 o'clock in the morning till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, all to make maybe, a couple of gallons by the end of the weekend. Now, in maximum of 4 hours from start to finish, we have a couple 100 gallons of syrup. We went from, as Tim said, roughly 15 quart of wood in a month's time down to 3 quart of wood. So, the conservation of all that wood, the time, the energy, it's just so much more efficient and better for the environment. Yeah.
Right.
There is a lot of work. I'd be lying if I didn't tell you there wasn't a lot of work
Yeah.
and paperwork.
Yeah.
and you
Paperwork,
have
for
to
sure.
show the NRCS that you're committed to these programs.
Yep.
They do make you work for it. I would say, they want to see that you're definitely interested in it and you're going to follow through with what you say you're going to do. If they're going to assist people in a program, I think that they want to see results and they want to see that you're going to carry through. There's time, you have to show them, there's a minimum of 4 years that you have to rotational graze one field and they monitor it. I see Damien and talk to Damien a couple times a month, if not more, especially during the summer. In the winter time, he's following through with me on a monthly basis on what my next year's grazing plan is. Have you submitted your grazing plan? What are you going to do different next year? What could you have done different? How are you going to correct this problem? So there is some paperwork involved. You definitely have to think it through. But do I think it's worth it?
Absolutely.
Financially? Absolutely.
Yeah.
You just have to put some work into it. But the resources they're there and they're definitely valuable. The knowledge that NRCS and the conservation
Yeah.
and the resources are, in my opinion, priceless.
Yep.
You just have to reach out and use them. And if you show the interest and you follow through on it, those people will do anything you want.
Right. You get it back tenfold.
You get it back tenfold.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you very much for that response. And I would like to just add that personally, I have encountered NRCS with timber stand improvement and I have a woodlot. And I agree with you on the paperwork, but tenfold reward is absolutely close to true.
Yeah.
And I appreciate your efforts in following through with all this and being here tonight to say so.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. Absolutely. So if you have other questions, if you can put them in the chat, I think we want to move on because I think Aaron has some really exciting things to talk to us about. He's got a different type of operation. And Aaron Lichtenberg, please talk to us a little bit about your farm.
Well, thanks a lot for setting me up to say that I have exciting things to say, because now I have to fulfill on that. Well, first off, as you can see in my my little window there, I'm not Elizabeth Lichtenberg. I'm Aaron Lichtenberg. That's my wife. And I must say first that I'm always impressed with animal folks. And I'm no grazer, but I have to say that Tim and Heidi are impressive to me. We don't know each other that well, of course. We've maybe crossed at some meetings, but to those of you that don't really know what it takes, I think they've given you maybe a very small window of a picture of what it takes to be so organized and so committed to doing the right thing. Again, I'm not a grazer, but the amount of work that they clearly have put into their operation, it shows to me because I know what it takes to be organized in how you approach agriculture. And I just have to say I'm rather impressed. My other comment is that their past experience doing what they've done, I think is very important to note. I did not have a past in agriculture and I bludgeoned my way into this, and that's not the way to do it. So if you have the ability to go work with somebody or meet other folks like Tim and Heidi, if you want to get into animals or just anything and everything out there that you can throw yourself at to get familiar with what you think you want to do, I sincerely recommend it because again, I had no history in what we do, which is small scale vegetable production. We started in 2012, roughly, and have been reinventing ourselves every year since. We used to manage somewhere around 2.5 acres of mixed vegetable production, and in 2019, we culminated our career with a 100-member CSA program, which my wife and I predominantly organized and managed all on our own. We do not have any staff or anything otherwise. And I know that a lot of farmers aren't very forthcoming necessarily all the time with talking about finances, but I'm happy to say what they were because they're oftentimes not that impressive. Sorry, Donna. We had gross sales of around $90,000. And, at any given time, over the years, we've taken home from $6,000 to, I think we went out on top last year at taking home 15 grand. So pretty impressive stuff. That's just a kind of quick nuts and bolts. I don't want to go on forever about all the different intricacies of our operation, because I know we're here to talk about the conservation efforts that we've engaged in as a farm over the years. And again, like I said, I have no history in the biz. So what I did make sure that I did was to reach out to everybody I could from UNH Cooperative Extension, and just getting out there into the ag world. The other thing that farmers are forthcoming about is what they do, how they do it. And I can't think of another profession that someone is so willing to share what they do and how they do it. And I think that's because it's not easy to do. So most farmers are like, hey, you want to do it? Jump right in. Water's warm. And so I was able to learn a lot about what's out there, and eventually did get turned on to NRCS through participating, whether it was at a fruit and vegetable conference, or, I can't recall now how I learned about all these things, but once I did finally learn about NRCS, I was pretty happy to do so. And without my participation with NRCS and the programs they offered, it would have been very, very difficult for us to get our start. We really bootstrapped it from the beginning, as you might have gleaned from my earlier comments. We didn't start with a lot, and we just kind of built and let the business pay for itself as it continued to grow. But for instance, high tunnels are very expensive real estate. And for those of you that don't know what a high tunnel is, it looks like a greenhouse, but it is a structure. Obviously, I'm sure you've seen them around, to where you're growing in the ground. And the NRCS high tunnel program was how we got our first early high tunnel. 4 years later, storm came along, blew that away. That's another story. But we did end up applying again and got a double the size of our earlier tunnel, and we are still operating out of that today. That's just one of the programs. We've done a mulching program. We've done a pollinator plow program. Wow, I'm impressed, Jess. I literally gave Jess the picture like at 6:56, I think, tonight. So that's our rolling heights. And by the way, I didn't prepare very well for this, so I apologize to everybody ahead of time, but I'll try and make up for it in me being verbose. That is a rolling thunder high tunnel from Rimmel. And I really like the Rimmel houses, but as you can see, beyond the design attributes that the company sells you, you should definitely do your homework and think about things and know how to keep things connected to the ground. I installed that project via NRCS cost share program, as Heidi and Tim mentioned before. At the time, that's the other thing to mention about NRCS is programs are constantly changing. So if you talk to one grower and they have a certain experience about a program, it may be different. In fact, from that high tunnel that you see all tangled in a mess there to the high tunnel that we have now, the program was completely different. As Heidi and Tim said, they were on the hook for some portion of what they had to pay, and that was very similar with this high tunnel that you see there. With our newer high tunnel, we actually got 100% of it covered. As they said also, you do have to come up with that money ahead of time, and then you install the project. And I think that goes for probably just about any NRCS program where you're going to execute the project and then you're going to receive payments for it based on what they're looking to find. I've talked to many other farmers that maybe they've had difficulties with RCDS or they might gripe about it, but oftentimes I think that's because they haven't completed their projects in a timely manner, or us Yankees were pretty stubborn sometimes, and we aren't necessarily always willing to do everything to the spec that is given to us. And, that's just part of the deal, as Heidi and Tim alluded to, is that completing things based on how they want to see you do them, and completing them in a timely fashion and just completing them is the best way to participate with NRCS. And I personally didn't find the paperwork to be too cumbersome. They, I think, believe they mentioned William Hoey, that he was my agent as well, very helpful in how to participate with the programs, filling out the paperwork. It's the government after all, come on, there's a lot of paperwork to fill out, but I think it's, at the end of the day, it's very well worth it. So, there was a question earlier about the economics and desire to participate in NRCS programs. And I will say that I don't know how Heidi and Tim's experience were, but a lot of the things that I chose to do, programs that were that involved NRCS, I was planning on managing them anyhow. We were actually an organic operation, so there's only a handful of different tools in our toolbox that we can do to execute, whether it's weed management or soil building, et cetera, et cetera. So if I'm gonna cover crop anyway. I'm very interested in doing multi-species cover crops. I'm very interested in doing mulching. I was going to do those practices anyway. So why wouldn't I just participate with NRCS to get some of that paid for? Right. Sometimes it's not much money, like I think if I remember off the top of my head, one of the mulching projects, I mean, maybe I got paid $300 for it, but I was going to do it anyway. Why not take it? I mean, we make, I make my dollars like, $3 at a time for a bunch of kale. So it all adds up in the end. And it's also incentivizes you as a farmer to keep doing what I think a lot of us have in the back of our minds. We have very, sometimes, let's say, optimistic desires to finish something. And let's face it, the season runs away with you. And before you know it, you didn't get that done, whatever it was. And having NRCS and participating with them can also help you hold your own feet to the fire in finishing and executing something, because you do have a little bit of money to get in the end to help you through with it. And it's been a great resource for me. So the economics and the desire to participate, that wasn't very hard for me to wrap my head around. And for me, the details on execution, that's just part of the programs. One of the other things that Heidi and Tim mentioned was the drought. And I really feel bad for them. And I was thinking of the grazers around the state quite often when I was watching people water their lawns and overgraze them with a lawnmower all summer. But I participated in what's called an irrigation water management plan with NRCS. And I did have to push real hard for that one. But, in the beginning it was because I felt like, I'm such a small grower. Why do I deserve to have such a robust program? Those of you that don't know about the irrigation water management plans, but it's a way to get off of overhead irrigation and onto maybe something more of a water conserving program like drip irrigation. And even though I was at the time a small little, dinky 2-acre farm, once you participate in a program like that and really learn what conservation looks like, it's pretty amazing. It involved moisture meters that you put into the ground because, before, you're just kind of grabbing the soil and getting a feel for it and seeing, and, you're doing a lot of judgments by gut on whether or not to have an irrigation event or not. And through the water management program and the moisture meters, you actually had real tools to make these management decisions. And not only that, but the process of having a flow meter and knowing exactly how much water you're pulling. I mean, at the time I was pulling from the Guilford Brook, right upstream from other farms. And in the responsible use of water, especially in years like we had this year or back in 2017 in the other drought and what's probably more droughts to come, water management is a huge, huge issue. And for me, even as a small farm, I saw how many thousands and thousands of gallons a vegetable operation uses. That's just applying to the fields. That's not even counting the wash and pack shed. So those types of programs end up just making you a better farmer overall. And in the end, you keep adding to your ability to manage your operation, your business better. And instead of saying, oh, I think those tomatoes need to be irrigated, you can actually look at your moisture meter and you can make a more responsible decision based on what the actual soil is telling you. So that's just another program I wanted to make sure I mentioned. Yeah, I'm not going to just keep droning it on. So I think for the most part, that's kind of a quick snapshot of how our farm has engaged with NRCS and conservation aspects. I do actually want to mention though, because I'm looking at Donna right now, that BCCD did also help us install a pollinator plot as well. They kind of worked in concert with us with NRCS. So there's a lot there, and I just encourage anybody that's interested to just really reach out and explore your options out there.
Well, I think you mentioned a number of things about why NRCS does what it does. It's because they're looking for the win-wins, what's good for the environment and what's good for the farm operation. It's looking for ways that we can help both. And I think that, and Aaron, I want to thank you and Heidi and Tim for sharing, for sharing your farms with others. We've done grazing workshop on Heidi and Tim's place, and I know that we've done show me trips and shared some of the practices that you're doing on your place, Aaron. And so I think that's really important. Like, as you said, farmers learn from each other, and folks like you folks that are adopting some of these new techniques and trying new things are making it easier for others to jump in with both feet. So I really applaud what you're doing. So Aaron, any new things that you're looking at for this coming year?
Well, I'll just be honest and say no, not really. We actually lost our land lease in which we were growing, and the majority of our business and what ran the 100-member CSA. We lost that last year to a land transfer. There was a new owner that took over our farm property, and so since we've kind of scaled back now, we're on barely a quarter acre. The new thing is to figure out how to keep running a business in a different way, but kind of still keep things in the air. So we've pivoted to cut flowers and special events, and we're just again, just another year of reinventing ourselves and figuring this whole thing out. So with regards to NRCS and conservation programs, not necessarily right now. Got a lot of extra irrigation tubing right now, I'll tell you that.
Are you looking to partner with on another property, or just kind of taking a break for a while?
Certainly not taking a break. It's been bizarre. I decided to take on a deck project this year because, who works on their house as a farmer during the summer? And that just about killed me, because somehow we're still just crazy busy. We've got a whole value-added program. I actually was kind of a migrant farmer. I worked at 2 other farms this year, some which loaned me some space. So I've kind of done some partnership. It's not necessarily my intent. My intent is to try and eventually spend a little bit more deliberate effort actually finding our own piece, which that's really what needs to happen for us.
All right. So some questions for Aaron. Well, great job. I appreciate you talking about your operation.
No problem.
Yeah. So I also wanted to do an introduction. In addition to great help from some of the specialists that Heidi and Tim and Aaron both mentioned from NRCS, one of the things that happens is that they're spread pretty thin. And so our organization, there's a statewide organization of conservation districts called the New Hampshire Association of Conservation Districts, and Richard is our president for the organization. And one of the things that we did was we were successful in getting a grant to create 2 conservation planner positions to basically reach out and help with the outreach with farmers and forest landowners, to let them know, to provide technical assistance on planning and also to let folks know what resources are available. And Jessie Wright is with us tonight. She's one of the 2 conservation planners that I mentioned, and we're delighted to have her on the team. And Jessie, you can talk a little bit about the areas that you cover and some of the things that you've been involved with, and the kinds of help that you folks are providing.
Sure. Thanks, Donna. Hey, everybody. Yeah, things have been a little wild during all this crazy pandemic 2020 times, but NHACD, the New Hampshire Association of Conservation Districts, and NRCS are plugging right along, getting farmers like Aaron and Liz and Heidi and Tim the conservation planning needs that they have. Wanted to offer a little bit of context or maybe some language too around the stuff that these farmers presented tonight. You know, they talked a lot about all the holistic farm approach that these plans take, between the grazing management plans and maybe the wildlife protection, all the things wrapped up into one. And when we talk about that, that's your conservation plan, right? I don't think we use that term yet tonight, but when we think about a little bit of irrigation management and a little bit of high tunnel and a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and we wrap that all into one package, that's your conservation plan. And so when we talk about conservation planning, as is the title of this webinar, that's what we're talking about, right? Like looking at all the lands that you have under your management. You could own them, you could not. And how do we use the natural resources that are on those lands to the best of their ability for both you as the farmer, producer, owner, manager, and to manage them as really great stewards of the land. And that's really what the goal of the conservation plan is. People like myself and my colleague, Bill Fosher, who works on the other side of the state, work really closely with people like Bill Hoey and Damon Mee of NRCS to get those plans into hands of farmers like, or owners or producers like you guys. So I think that context of what a conservation plan is a really important distinction to make. And I was glad that everybody talked about the financial benefits, right? Because these programs that NRCS offers that can be prescribed in your conservation plan are really beneficial, not only because they offer some cost share, right? They're not technically grants. We talk about offering cost share for folks. And sometimes they're 75%, depending on what kind of farmer you are. You know, if you're a historically underserved farmer, it can be up to 90% of your project costs. And right now there's a special interest for new and beginning farmers. So people who have owned their land for less than 10 years, they can also get up to 90%. Folks who are in specialty priority areas right now can also get 90%. So that's decided at the state level. And this year focuses on watershed protection. So that's all kind of just up in the air still for 2021. You know, as Aaron talked about, priorities change from year to year from USDA, but they're working on keeping really, really clean water. And so projects that can help protect watersheds in the fiscal year 2021 are going to be really important. So yeah, that my point is that 75% can sometimes be up to 90, depending on what kind of landowner or what region you're in, which is really great. And not only do we offer that kind of financial benefit, but we can come and talk anytime and give that kind of technical assistance that like, hey man, like, hey Damon, like this is going on my field. I don't know what to do about it. Or have you ever seen this before? Or shoot, what are other people doing? That kind of one-on-one technical assistance, somebody to call on the other end of the phone who's going to pick up and say, well, I'm not really sure, but this is what this guy's doing. Or, oh yeah, I've seen that before. Here's what other people have done. I think that's, for me, one of the best things I feel about working one-on-one with farmers, that we can have those conversations and offer that kind of technical assistance, because man, sometimes you just need to talk things out. And that's something that we're really excited about. And for folks that are on the line who want to try that out, Donna has all of our contact information, and we're happy to work with landowners. I'm going to be working a lot in Belknap County this year, so I'm excited to work with some of y'all.
We're glad to have your help, Jessie. Any questions for Jessie or any of the other any of the other folks tonight. You know, I know from this is a series of 4 Tuesday night conversations. And our first one just focused overall on conservation planning. We'll be getting a link back to you folks. That was recorded, so if you missed it, you can tune in and see what we talked about. And the next, and Jess mentioned what the next 2 sessions are going to be about. For example, in that first session, one of the topics that came up was one of the participants was scratching her head about how to deal with a really tough. She had 10 acres that had a pretty embedded invasive issue with bittersweet. And so we were talking about that. And, based on that, our conservation district is looking at doing a special webinar or workshop related to invasives and how to address them. So we need that kind of feedback, from you folks on what kinds of questions and assistance would really make a difference for you. So please do share with us if you've got some particular areas. I know depending on when we were talking about it with Heidi and Tim, they said that their cows kind of like that bittersweet. So there may be some benefits for having somebody
Come on down.
for inviting his cows over for a chew here. So
Right.
We had a guy in Guilford who had a problem with bittersweet, and I brought 20 cows over there and absolutely just took care of it.
Early in the season, that's important.
Early in the season.
Early in the season.
Yeah.
Susan, this is Lisa. Was that you that was talking about the bittersweet? Was that you, Susan? Yeah, I thought so.
Yes.
yeah, I thought, I wasn't sure. I didn't want to ask because I wasn't positive. I couldn't remember your last name, but so anyway, yeah, we may have made your new best friends here.
My new best friends are probably about 1.5 miles from me.
All right.
Donna, I'd like to just put in a word from NHACD that I
Yeah.
appreciate entirely this whole enterprise. And when we heard the presenters talking about the advantages of partnering with NRCS, one of the easiest access is going to your local districts. And because this has been going to be rebroadcast on the NHACD website, there might be people to listen to this that aren't here tonight. And so I would encourage them, whether you're in Belknap County or anywhere in the state, contact your local district. And that's a great access to NRCS and any number of other partners that might facilitate an enhancement of your project. And I would like to also thank the presenters who did an excellent job today.
Yeah.
One of the things that I heard was like, even if it's $300 for a small project, sometimes it's multiple thousands. So it's really not chicken feed here. So, and far as Jesse and Bill Fosher goes, their services are free and they can be consulting, tell you where to go for the next step. So whether you end up with a conservation plan or not, that's the place to start.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that both NRCS and NHACD and the districts are all really keen on is starting to build long-term relationships, right? Like
Right.
Heidi and Tim started 4 years ago, but their relationship with NRCS and the district is going to last for many, many years to come. No matter where Aaron goes in his next move, it better not be too far, Aaron. But no matter where it goes, he's going to have already built in that relationship that he can say, hey, here's this next thing that I'm thinking. What can we do? Most of that paperwork is done. You're in the system already. A lot of the hoops are already in, and we can continue to build new conservation plans. And there's hundreds of different programs through USDA. So really, we're all super excited to build long-term relationships to help farms just keep plugging away and stay in our community.
Right,
It might be $300 that first time, but over a lifetime, it could be a lot more.
A lot. more.
right.
I
Yeah.
didn't mention the more expensive ones.
Well, New Hampshire is a long way from feeding itself, so we really need to support our farmers and grazers because I think we're at like 6% of being able to sustain ourselves with existing agricultural operations. So we've got a long way to go, but we've certainly got some very innovative and creative and committed farmers that are doing some really great things out there. And it's all about networking but these plans, I think, pay off in terms of being able to lay out what your strategy is and how to get there and what kind of resources are available to do that. So thank you for joining us tonight, and come visit us next Tuesday night at 7. We're going to be talking about something completely different, but estate planning, easements, these are all, and some of the other tools, legal tools that are out there, are all part of what we can do, keeping farm and forest land in farm and forest land. So we invite you to join us again, and Jess, thank you for hosting us, and thanks to Heidi, Tim, and Aaron, and Jesse for being with us, and Richard, thank you for coming tonight. And Sue, maybe we have found you, a little bit of a solution. All right, well, thank you all for joining us tonight. And if you have any suggestions for workshops or things that you'd like us to feature in the future, please do let us know. And thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody.